All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So, thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here and to share what I believe to be a fairly common problem among PMs with one of the more extreme examples of it I've seen in my past experience. It's actually from in the last year. And that problem is, what do you do when everyone seems to want conflicting features? And I use the term everyone really intentionally because it's not just your users. We talk about being really user centric, but in reality, especially in larger organizations, you're not just uh, you're not just prioritizing what users want. You also have to take into account other internal stakeholders as well. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. I think as a PM, you likely have a good deal of empowerment over your product's roadmap. And so it's important to have a decision framework in your mind about what to do in these types of situations. And so I'm going to share the one that I've sort of developed over the years, that has shaped based on all of the lived experiences I've had and perspectives. It's probably going to be different from other people, but hopefully that by sharing this and you listening to not only my perspectives but other people's, you'll develop your own sense as well and be able to solve these problems without batting an eye. And so we're going to dive into a pretty specific example. I've abstracted it a bit to make it more approachable and just to hide any confidential information that I can't share. But I think there's still a lot of value in this discussion that we'll have. Before we dive right in, though, I will just talk about myself really quickly. We'll go through the scenario, and then I'll just present my framework. And then at the end, I'll just tie it all together, and I'll even share the specific decision that my team and I made about this problem and where we're at today as a result of that and sort of the impact of it. So a little bit about myself first. I've been at Microsoft for 6 years now in a variety of different PM roles. At Microsoft, there's a joke that if you're not an engineer and you're not a salesperson, you probably have the title of program manager. And so it's a very vague concept. From my own experience, I've had various experiences building both solutions from 0 to 1. So putting a internal platform in place where there was nothing before, and then also scaling smaller solutions that were maybe more at the proof of concept phase and scaling those to be enterprise grade solutions. And those have been across a variety of different functions from our devices supply chain team. So that's our Microsoft's Xbox and Surface businesses. I've worked across our customer support organization and built some data science programs over there. And then I've also spent time with our retail stores. And finally, where I'm at now is on the enterprise licensing side. So I lead a platform that is used to model deal economics for our B2B enterprise deals. So basically, our users are the sellers at Microsoft that are constructing winning deals for the company with some of our largest customers. And then in my free time, really enjoy cooking, trying new restaurants and bars, reading, and then spending time with my Great Dane, whose name is Gatsby. And so with that, a little bit about myself, let's just dive into this scenario. Again, it's loosely based on a problem that I've experienced in the last year. And this is for an internal product, but the lessons are going to translate really well for customer-facing products as well. And then I've abstracted it a bit, so it's going to feel relevant no matter where you're coming from, whether you're in software product management or not. And so if you would, please put yourself in the shoes of someone who works at Pineapple Inc. And Pineapple Inc. is not a tech company at all. Rather, it is a company that sells fruit and pineapples and other tropical fruits to other businesses for sale, to grocery stores and to restaurants. And so you work there because you're just really passionate about the fruit industry, even though it's pretty commoditized. And specifically, what you do is you are a product lead for a platform that is used internally called FruitSmart. And what FruitSmart does is it generates financials for B2B deals for sales teams. And so essentially, your sellers who sell fruit are using your product to make smarter decisions about the deals that they're putting together. How much discounting are we providing on our fruit? Are we providing any additional concessions or investments, et cetera? That's the gist of it. In terms of outcomes, this provides faster decision making for your sellers. It also saves the company money because if you're able to visualize these deals in a more centralized and streamlined and standardized way, your user base will be able to discount the products less and just look for opportunities to essentially give away less money to win these deals. And so More tactically, this Fruit Smart platform has two features. So there's feature X and there's feature Y. And it doesn't really matter what these features are in, more tactically than that. We can just refer to them as X and Y. We know that these are what our users currently value. We have had great adoption and success, and we've had significant cost savings as a result of this being in place. And we have a pretty large user base. The majority of complex deals that the company does are run through this platform. And so you're basically in the shoes right now of this product manager over this fruit sales platform, and you're planning for the next sprint. And so you partner with your engineering team pretty closely, which is a good habit to get into. That's just a little side lesson that I'm not going to talk about too much today. But your engineers and you are in pretty close alignment, and you're in the process of proposing what the next sprint should include in terms of some major features and just the longer term roadmap beyond that. What are the problems that you want to tackle in the upcoming period? And so before we do that, I like to start with our users. So they're the ones we're solving problems for first and foremost. Let's take a look at who our users are. For the purposes of this example, we've got two user segments that have been identified, both through surveys, through interviews, through other just user testing and insights. We've seen these two segments emerge. Now, in real life, there's likely going to be more than this, but just for the purposes of this simple example, we're going to keep it to two. You've got essentially a small group of highly engaged users. So about 20% of your user base is highly engaged, and they fall into the first user group. And then the other 80% of your users fall into the medium to low engagement bucket. They're still using your platform, but they're using maybe just the minimum possible functionality to be considered active users. And they don't necessarily use all of the features on a regular basis, but they are still using it. And so that's what your active user base looks like. You've got those two segments. We do know a little bit more about them as well. And so through our user research, we've also learned that our highly engaged users are more likely to enjoy learning new technologies, processes, and tools. These are the people that are selling fruit, who like to experiment with new ways of accomplishing their job faster and more efficiently. And then in contrast, we've got our lesser engaged users who are more likely to stick with the processes and tools they've always known. So they're a bit change averse. They're less likely to want to learn new technologies, and they're less likely to essentially differ from the processes that they've built for themselves over the years that they use. And so not a bad thing. I mean, there's not a good or a bad bucket in either of these. It's just these are your users, and you need to essentially help solve their problems and just realize where they're coming from. They would prefer the medium to low engagement bucket. They would prefer to focus their attention elsewhere rather than learning new technologies and processes. And that's, very fair. So the last thing that we know, we've been able to distill some asks essentially from each of these groups through surveys, through interviews, other user testing that we've done over the past few months. And we've distilled these asks down to two things. So the highly engaged users, they want more features. They want deeper analytical capabilities. And I've named this feature Z. So essentially, highly engaged users, they want another feature. We have X and Y today. They want to add feature Z and go even deeper into their analytics. On the other hand, we've got our medium and low engagement users. They have shared repeatedly, and we have the statistically significant insights to show that they do not want any more features. They only want features X and Y, which are in the platform today. And their preference is that they would get even simpler over time, these existing features that are there. So basically more intuitive, faster, etc. But don't add anything else. Don't layer on any other features. They want to just stick to what they've got today. And so I wish it were only this simple. It were only these two diametrically opposed. I mean, this is complex enough as it is, just dealing with this, especially in the same platform. But there's also a few other layers that I'd like to add in there as well. And so before we do that, I want to talk about what each of these user groups contribute to our metrics. That is something that is also relevant here. And so we know our highly engaged users are the ones that are saving the company significant money because they're leveraging this platform to the fullest extent. And they're essentially modeling their deals, and we're actually able to see significant cost savings from the work that they're doing. On the other hand, the medium to low engagement users, they aren't necessarily contributing to the financial impact as much, but they have the numbers essentially. All of our active users, the largest percent of them is there. And again, it's not like they're not using the platform. It's just that they're not generating the same financial impact as the high engagement users. And so it's just important to keep that in the back of our minds. We know that the first segment contributes the financial impact. The second segment contributes the essentially the usage numbers, both of which are important if you're building a business case for additional platform investment, et cetera. And so that's sort of where our users are at today. And then I mentioned that there's a few other layers of complexity that are here as well. So we strive to be user-centric, but there's a couple of other factors at play. And one of those is the sales leaders. So the company's sales leaders are rolling out a new selling process, essentially, and they really want us to deprecate feature X from our platform, even though it's a core value prop for our users. I mentioned before, features X and Y, or that's what's there today, and people really appreciate both of those across all user segments. And so we're really the only ones in the company that can offer that functionality from a technical perspective and just from where our organization sits in the company. But sales leaders really don't want sellers focusing on the metrics that come out of feature X anymore. They think it's going to actually speed up the time it takes to close deals if people don't look at feature X at all, or the information that comes from feature X. And so I think, you at this time, you might be thinking, well, you should build a business case that shows your users really value feature X. And so we're just going to assume for this example, that's already happened. So I've made my case, my leadership's made their case. We've all made our perspectives clear that we don't necessarily, agree with this. But the decision's been made, and so we're going to get on board with the idea. Like the sales process is changing regardless, and it's up to you. It's up to us. It's up to you to decide how to support it. You can either deprecate feature X or not, but you'll have to deal with the consequences either way. So essentially, you're going to anger your users if you do it, and you're going to anger the sales leaders if you don't do it. So that's another layer here. And to top that all off, we actually have one more stakeholder to consider. And so the final stakeholder to consider is an internal competitor. And I use this term because this is an internal platform. I use this term very loosely. We have another team that we work with, and we're actually really closely integrated with, but they're considering building some of our feature Y into their platform. Now, it's not going to be something where they flip a switch and it's going to be live tomorrow. It's going to take them months, if not a year or two, to get the full functionality that we have today, just based on their other priorities. It's not the most important thing for them, but they're thinking about building feature Y, and they're starting, the foundation of that. So I think we should keep that in the back of our mind. We don't need to have an existential crisis over it at this time. I think personally, my default reaction to this is like, oh no, they're trying to copy our work, do what we're doing. But that's really not the way to look at it here, because again, we're really close partners. At the end of the day, both of us, my team and the other team, we all want to get on board with doing what's right for the customers, and to help close deals as fast as possible. So wherever the right place to have these features, whether it's in this platform or another one, that's fine. But the gist of it is, it's not going to be ready tomorrow. It's just something to be aware of. Just keep in mind that there are people building similar functionality, and despite that, because it's going to take so long, and we also have some other things in our backlog that we think will offer users unique value that no one else can do yet. And so it's not like we're at the point where we want to just shut down our platform completely. That's not an option. We're not just giving up and throwing in the towel. We still think that, even though there's something else out there that might be doing some similar work, our platform also has a lot of value, and they're actually really, the two are tightly integrated. So you can use one and pass information between the two. Hopefully I'm not getting too abstract here. But so those are our stakeholders. Let's move on to essentially what to do next. So this is where you're at today, and now essentially the question that I have to all of you is, where should you go from here? You've got users who want new features. You've got users who want only the features that exist today. You've got sales leaders who want one of your features gone, and you've got a competitor who's competitor, loose terms. A competitor who's starting to build some of the functionality that exists in your platform today. And we don't want to have an existential crisis. So we have to think of a constructive way forward. And so let's move forward to the approach. that I take in these types of situations. I've put all of our user segments and stakeholders up in the top right, just because I know that this is a lot to keep track of, and we'll just keep that there for reference for you. So the first thing I like to think about is analyzing the user segments that we have and what are our users' motivations for, asking for what they want, or, the results of whatever we do. How is that going to impact user motivations and the problems that our users are facing on a regular basis? And so we kind of already talked through this, honestly, when we talked through the user segments, but I think it's just important to call that out, is that's an intentional action. Like I structured it that way because that is how I like to think about these types of problems. Next up, think about opportunity cost. And so if you're not familiar with this concept, I think I actually learned this in like high school economics, and it applies really well to when you're experiencing this sort of conflict, which is what is what are you giving up what is the value of what you're giving up with the action that you choose to take. So if I choose to build feature Z for our high engagement users, for instance, what I'm actually giving up with that is the confidence that the sales leaders will have in me in the future because I ignored their request to remove feature X. So it's essentially, what do I give up by taking the step that I choose? And so that's one example. The other, I kind of already covered this one, but like if I intentionally go against the sales leaders and keep feature X, I would lose the confidence and trust of my business stakeholders. So like that's the opportunity cost. This is just really a good way to think about what you lose by taking a particular action. And I think it's especially relevant when you've got all of these conflicting potential actions to take. So like I could do any combination of any of these things that users and stakeholders are asking. How do I decide on the right one? And then the final thing to keep in mind is the priorities of the business. We want to be as user-centric as possible, but it's simply not feasible to do that 100% of the time, all the time, especially in large organizations. There are going to be other internal priorities that need consideration. And I would argue that this happens more frequently the larger the organization it is. And so the extent to which that third one applies to you is it's going to depend on what you're doing, what your scope is. But I think it's important to throw it up there regardless, because you're not realistically, it's not you want it to be about users as much as possible, but it's not necessarily always going to be. So now that we walked through the approach, let's apply this to 5 potential next steps I see in our next engineering sprint. And so you can assume that everything I'm about to show you, all 5 of these potential paths, are equally feasible, and we can complete them all at the same time. We've already cleared all of these with your engineering team, these options. Again, that's a really good habit to get into. Just communicate as early as possible about with your engineers, and they'll help you assess level of effort and things like that. And so we've already done that. So now we essentially just have to pick between 5 options. We can do any of them are equally feasible. So the first one that I want to talk about, and I'm putting the approaches that, or the decision framework at the bottom of the screen here, just for your reference, and I'm keeping the user segments and the stakeholder priorities up at the top right as well, just so you can refer to that. So for the first option, we can build feature Z. And so if we build feature Z, I'm going to go through each of these three points for each of these options really quick, just so you can kind of see in practice how I would apply them. So for building feature Z, we would satisfy our high engagement users, and we would potentially open the door to even more financial impact because we know that that's what they contribute. However, this goes directly against what our medium and low engagement users are asking for. They don't want additional potential complexity. They don't want additional features to have to deal with. And so that's how that would impact our users. I think from an opportunity cost perspective, it's important to consider that by building Z, we're potentially losing out on our sales leaders trusting us and having confidence in us that we can be a good partner to them, because we basically went directly against their orders and we did not remove feature X like they asked. And then with the competitor piece, this one's interesting because we would be adding new value to our platform, and our quote internal competitor is not really thinking about this yet. And so we'd be ahead of the game there. And so in everything that I just explained, I kind of went through these 3 steps. I didn't explicitly call them out, but these are the 3 things that went into my explanation for feature Z. And so I'm going to do this again, but for our next one, and just see if you can pick up on, me picking apart each of these steps down here at the bottom. So the next one is building feature B. We have not talked about feature B because no one has explicitly asked us for it, but it's something that we've been testing internally, and we think that it might be ready for, we could potentially greenlight it to roll out to everybody, to all of our user base. And so, and for the purposes of this fruit example, I mean, you can think of feature B as something like benchmarking, for instance, that makes it really easy to compare the deal that you're working on to similar deals that the company's done in the past. And so it just essentially provides a different lens to think about when you are selling fruit, which is what our company is doing. But it's not something that anyone's thinking about or asking for explicitly. And so for this one, we'll go through, again, the user segment piece and the user motivation. So our users are not asking for this. If we think about our highly engaged users, we know that they like more data and more decision points when they're using this platform. And so for feature B, they would likely, based on, we've done some testing with some of them, with a small subset of these users, and just based on what we know about this segment in general, they would likely be pretty open to this idea and using it and trying it out. I think the problem would come in with the medium and low engagement users. And so these users represent such a great opportunity because there's so many of them and we can drive further adoption with them, but we know that they want simplicity above all. And so building feature B for them and rolling that out is a risk because they would likely require much more training than the other user segment, and it would likely take time to ramp up that adoption. And so that's feature B from a user perspective. Opportunity cost perspective, what are we giving up by building feature B? Well, we're actually giving up the opportunity to give users directly what they're asking for. So we're not building feature Z, and we're not keeping it simple with X and Y only. And so our users might be frustrated and might, honestly, some of them might churn to the extent that you can churn off of an internal platform that most people use. It does happen to a certain extent. And then opportunity cost from a sales leader perspective is also, we'll build feature B, but it doesn't do anything to appease the sales leader's request to remove feature X. So important to keep that in mind. And then that sort of covers the business priority as well. I think from a competitor standpoint, this is another interesting one because no one's thinking about feature B yet, especially our quote competitor. And so if we build this, it could actually give us a leg up on the quote competition, even though, again, not really our competition, but for the purposes of this example. Option 3, when we deprecate feature X, that's what our sales leaders would like us to do. And so we can do that. From a user perspective, we know that this is going to anger and frustrate all of our users because they all rely on feature X. And if anything, I mean, our medium and low engagement users, this is like feature X is 50% of why they even use this thing in the first place. And so if we were to remove feature X and not replace it with anything, it could spell potential catastrophe. I think you'd see major complaints from within the selling organization that's using this. And you'd probably see, again, some of that churn to the extent that churn is possible on an internal sales platform. There are ways around that. So that's from a user perspective, deprecation. Opportunity costs, I think we've talked, what you lose out here, again, is giving users directly what they ask for. And in fact, again, you're kind of angering them even more than you might need to. And then from a competitive standpoint, this one's interesting because you would deprecate half of the reason your platform exists today, which is X and Y. And then you'd basically only be left with feature Y, which is the same thing that the competitor is building. And so you're basically at that point, I think it might lead you to an existential crisis around, okay, does this really need to exist if we only provide this one functionality that this other team is also trying to implement in a different way? So that's option 3. Option 4 is to build feature Z and deprecate feature X. This would, let's think I'm going to go through the steps again, I'm trying to get some repetition in terms of my framework, just so you can see it applied in a number of different scenarios. But so building Z, deprecating X, from a user perspective, this would satisfy your highly engaged users. I think the opportunity cost here is that you're losing out on giving the medium and low engagement users on what they would like. Again, they want simplicity and they actually really like feature X, and you're now getting rid of it. So that's something that you're giving up. And you're giving up on the potential satisfaction, you're giving up on the potential impact that from that user segment. This would, from a business priorities perspective, satisfy what the sales leaders are looking for. This would essentially align your platform to the new selling process. So all good there. And then from a competitive standpoint, I mean, it's kind of a wash because you're getting rid of one feature, but you're adding in another one. I think this is also probably how the highly engaged users will feel. Like it's not a complete one-for-one swap, but you're kind of, I don't know, you might not make them as mad because you're at least giving them something to replace feature X with. And then finally, build feature B and deprecate feature X. This one is interesting because if you look at it from a pure user motivation and user request perspective, no one is asking for this, but it could be a valid replacement for feature X over time, even though we've discussed previously that, not everyone's going to adopt this right away, and it's going to require some convincing. That being said, feature B, there is a lot of potential there. There's some excitement about it within the organization, and so that is a potential path. This would also satisfy the sales leader, so we're good from a business priorities perspective. And it would also give us a leg up on the quote competition because no one else is thinking about feature B at this time. And so these are the 5 options. These are not the only 5 options by any means. I'm just sort of trying to simplify it as much as I can. And I know that this is even still a lot. Just more to illustrate more than anything the approach that I like to take, which is thinking about your users, thinking about what you're giving up, the opportunity cost, and then just keeping those business priorities in mind at all times. And so in my case, in this, this is somewhat close to an example that I've experienced over the last year, this problem in general. And what we ended up going with was the last option, basically deploying feature B and deprecating feature X. We wanted to make sure that we stayed on good terms with the sales leaders, the equivalent stakeholders in the real scenario. And then there's a lot of buzz and promise around feature B and what it could do in the long term in terms of making people think differently about how to land successful deals at the company. And so that's the option that we went with. As expected, as we kind of talked through, I mean, we did see a little bit of drop off in users just because of deprecating feature X. People really appreciated it. But we think in the long run that feature B is something that we can really drive adoption on, and there's a lot more potential, and it's a lot more relevant for people at the end of the day. But of course, the challenge to overcome at that point is just the adoption and getting people to change their process. So that part's in progress. But with that, I'll just like to just wrap up with these takeaways. So I'll just put my lessons up here again. I think they're in the notes for the webinar. And just wanted to thank you so much for listening in, and feel free to reach out directly if you have any questions or comments. I'm definitely open to your feedback. So thank you very much.